May the 25th, 2025. Guys, I hope everyone's having a great Memorial Day weekend. I hope it's safe and you're traveling to the beach and back or wherever you're going, and I hope you're having good cookouts and just good get-togethers with friends and families. But remember what the day's about, okay? It's about our veterans. What you're looking at is the sun, and I'm going to play it forward in slow motion for a reason, then I'll put it back to normal. But we have a returning visitor right here. Now, right over here, we got a sunspot that's it's been like a repeating rocket all day with very strong flares. But right here, what you're seeing that's coming around the edge of the sun was a coronal mass ejection from our old friend, the largest sunspot of this sun cycle. We saw it come around the surface of the sun for 14 days. Didn't even appear to have any tight flaring. Now it's traveled on the backside. It's about to return, and it looks like that it's much more active, and it may be coming back with a vengeance. Let's speed this up now. But what we're seeing, look right here. Slow it back down one notch, is a rapid succession of flares, including an X flare and a very strong M flare that touched on the edge of an X flare. But there's probably 5 or 6 there in the row. But this has been a quiet area, but right now that huge sunspot is coming back, guys. We're getting radio blackouts from here. This is the one I can't help but be more concerned about, this area, because it was so large. And what you just saw, we'll look at it again, pay attention to it. The sunspot that we can't visibly see now threw out a very strong coronal mass ejection. It was caught up, you'll see it here coming up in a moment, into one of these large magnetic canopy rings. Watch right there. Bam! And then half of it slammed back into the sun. That's an amazing image. That would be a bolt of energy that nothing could withstand. No planet or anything with a direct hit like that. But that was amazing to see. But right now we're getting radio blackouts here. We're getting pressure on our atmosphere. We're getting very low solar wind right now in the 350s and 320s average. It's the lowest it's been in quite a while. But this may change because we're going to get some activity from this sunspot. And I watched all of them on a different camera, and we'll do that. But only one of them appeared to have a coronal mass ejection. But this right here is amazing to me, and we're going to look at it on SOHO, and you'll just see that entire quadrant of the sun's atmosphere start to glow as this giant comes back around. Now let's change satellites. Let's go C3. What you just saw was an eruption and an extreme outgassing event right there, guys. Over here's where the sunspot we are watching is. That's giving us the X flare and the multiple M flares. But you notice as this thing starts back over, look how dark it is right here on the 21st. 22nd, we're going to have a comet come up in here, hit the sun. We're going to let it rotate again. This is very interesting. You can see the speed of the outgassing in other areas. Here's our comet. But here, everything changes. There's a lot of energy coming back from that giant sunspot. Again, look how quiet it is. Then suddenly, in a few frames, look at that outgassing in the left top quadrant. Wow. That thing is, we're going to have to watch this one, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. It's coming back around. We'll be seeing it probably in the next couple of days, the visible edges of it, not just the effects. And so we'll probably be dealing with this thing almost to the middle of June, Earth facing this rotation, maybe the 10th or 12th, something like that. And there goes that comet again. Now, guys, we're looking at CERN live right now. Notice your timestamp and date at the top. They're not connecting right now. They have been throughout the day. We've been seeing power surges. But again, this is your windage, and this is your elevation, and they like to center. You can kind of see the fuzzy dot of beam 1 there, but beam 2 is much higher, so they're not really getting full power right now, but they have been. Again, live shot as we are speaking, guys. In the red and blue line, I always say this, when you combine those two together, that's where you get your power, and the black line indicates the power generated during that point. So when they both dropped off right here at 11, almost 12 this morning Central Time, so did the power. And as they rose, so did the power. But guys, we're creeping closer to 7,000 gigaelectron volts, or 7 teraelectron volts per beam. So again, 6.5 was the record over the last several years, and now we're really at 6.8, almost 6.9 right now. All of that combines into the energy, and what they want is the luminosity. Now, looking at our magnetosphere itself, notice how calm it is. We've seen red circle of the planet, pull that back down, and it's very low right now, but again, we're getting down to the 350 kilometers per second in solar wind speed, and that's what you're seeing. This will start to pick up. Now, a proton burst is different than a photon burst. We talked about that. So a proton burst would be a CME. It takes a couple days. But a photon burst is 8.2 minutes. And they're not really picked up on this chart. They're picked up on the radio blackout chart over on Solar Ham. Let's take a look at that. Again, it's been hot the last few days, guys. I'm looking right now. It's 103, the real feel at 88, humidity 84%, at 3:57 p.m. Central Time here in Central Mississippi. What you're looking at is what we're seeing, guys. This is the X-ray flux chart. And you can see yesterday we started to pick up right in here. Day before, it's been kind of quiet as far as X-flares, solar wind speed going back down in the 300s. Yesterday it started picking up, and it was just a climb of events. 1, 2, 3, 4, and probably 1, 2, 3 more there. 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's our X-flare, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Almost another X-flare here at 16 and 17 flares. All of this is coming from the smaller flare on the right side of the sun, not the larger one we're seeing coming. And was that first rotation again of that giant sunspot being very quiet, was it a warning? It sure looks like a different sunspot coming around now. I know I keep talking about that, but that's the main thing on my mind right now. And if you look at the probability of flares in this section, again, X-flare at 20%. Normally on a calm day, nothing happening, it'll be 0.05. Now, proton event 10%, and that's really where your damage comes from. But a C-flare 99 and M-flare 55% chance. Here's your absorption points. You see in the purple areas. These were the Earth-facing size when the two powerful flares hit. And looking at the sunspot summary, this is from the visible sunspot regions. 4098 is the culprit right now, throwing off all of these multiple flares, and it is growing. It is not a dual complex or a multi-complex system as far as beta, gamma, delta. It's just beta. But I think it's getting over in the region of the sun and earth magnetic connectivity point. I've talked about that before. We've seen it with other flares be very quiet till they get over into that region, over getting closer to the right side. And I don't know if that's what's happening now, but anytime, let me say this. Every planet has a magnetic connectivity point on our sun, and they're never the same. You can have them spread all the way across the face. One for Mars, Venus, Jupiter, the Earth, all of the above. Again, look up magnetic connectivity points between the sun and the planets. And those magnetic connectivity points are basically plasma tubes. And they're larger than the Earth. In other words, the connectivity point on the sun is probably 10 times larger than our planet. And so every 8.2 minutes, it sends a surge of plasma. It's the umbilical cord of our planet, this connection point. Every 8.2 minutes, there's a surge of energy from the sun to the earth, direct connectivity point. And when we start getting over the right side, and this is all, of the sun, that's usually in that quadrant where the earth's connectivity point is. And so what you're having, I think the sun is one polarity, the earth is another, or the planets are all a different, slightly different polarity than the sun. And that is the attraction. When you have like magnets, you try to put them together, they push away. So we got different components of magnetism, and the larger the planet compared to the sun would be the stronger magnetic connectivity point. Now, the one thing that is a little different is the sun's binary twin, which is Jupiter. It's a gas giant that really never exploded, but it is gravity, or as far as gravitationally, it is the sun's binary twin. Many of you heard me say this before. The Earth orbits around the center of the point of the sun, not the outside edge, but the center of the point. Every planet does that. In other words, you can draw a line from the center of the sun to the Earth, and that center point in the sun is just about the magnetic or the gravitational point. Jupiter is so large that it does not have a point of gravity in the rotation cycle inside the sun. It is outside of it, and both Jupiter and the sun rotate around that point. And I won't get into it here, but I've done videos over the last dozen years, and we talk about that. In other words, there's models that show that the asteroid belt was created by collision of Jupiter and or its moons as it and Saturn millions of years ago were pulled in closer to the inner solar system. There was a fifth planet between Mars and Jupiter. Now it's called the asteroid belt, and we get a lot of asteroid activity, shooting star activity, meteorite activity still to this day from that collision. There's a couple of almost planet-sized asteroids left in that demolition race, basically racing around between Mars and Jupiter. Now, the models show that Jupiter slowly pulled back out. Could that happen again? And really, that is the story to me of something coming into the inner atmosphere, creating destruction. You want to talk about whatever it is. But there's a lot of research where they took all the dynamics, put them into models, and showed that Jupiter and Saturn moved a little bit closer. Now, was that where Jupiter they added many more moons? Because the Galilean moons, of course, were spotted by Galileo. There was 4 or 5 maybe. Now they know there's hundreds. But, of course, technologies has the telescope, the satellites, let us see the true measure of what Jupiter's rings are. But it looks like because of their gravity being as strong as Jupiter, and in Saturn Jupiter's gravity is being as strong as the sun's almost, because they rotate around a point outside of the sun, and I think that's where both is that journey inward into our solar system. And that collision of the fifth planet, it scarred Mars. It stripped the atmosphere away from it. And then as Jupiter and Saturn expanded further back out, then they collected the rings of Saturn and the moons of Jupiter. And Mars and the Earth, the gravity between that and the sun created our asteroid belt. Again, it used to be a fifth planet. But that inward collision stopped it. Now we have an asteroid belt. It does orbit perfectly in where a fifth planet would, but again, there's thousands, maybe millions of pieces. But a couple of them are very large, and if they were to be hit by a comet or an incoming asteroid outside of that, then there would be hell to pay on the inside of the inner solar system, because it would be like an 8-ball tournament. And guys, there wouldn't be a drop of rain, any wind, anything on this planet without the sun's activity. But when we have these days like we had yesterday and today, look what we got again. Now, when I started the video, if there had been tornado warnings, I would have started with this. But there were severe thunderstorm warnings through this area. There was not tornado watches in Texas, and there was not warnings here in the very central southern part of Tennessee, right along the Alabama line. But all of this area here in the, I guess, dark pink is thunderstorm watches and warnings. This is a tornado watch, but these red dots, they are business. And let's look at and see what that is. Again, what we're seeing is the weather, again, getting into this heat in the afternoon, starting to pull up. Now, Florida is not showing a lot on you guys in the Panhandle and along the coast and up through Georgia at this point along the Carolina coast. But there is storms that could possibly form or already have. But let's look at the tornado warnings now in south central Tennessee. And these popped up 2 minutes ago at 4:12. It's 4:14 p.m. Central Time now. That's why I said they weren't there. A severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located 4 miles west of Afton or 12 miles north of Dickens and is nearly stationary. Tornado and 2-inch hail, guys, that's devastating. Radar indicated rotation. Flying debris will be dangerous to those caught without shelter. One of my huskies in the background back here. Mobile homes will be damaged or destroyed. Damage to roofs, windows, and vehicles will occur. Tree damage is likely. When you have tree damage, you have power outages normally. This tornadic thunderstorm will remain over mainly rural areas of northwestern Dickens and south central Motley counties. Take cover now. Move to a basement or an interior room or the lowest floor of a sturdy building. And Little Rocket, my husky's 2 years old now, is saying, yes, get to cover now. You hear that? There's something. Now let's look at national satellite images and radar at the moment. Tennessee, this is the storm right now that's giving you the 2 tornadoes. See that right there? Check that out. Right in there. It's very large, but you can definitely tell the deeper reds are right where they're talking about. But this red line of deep reds, or this long line, is popping up in Arkansas. Again, let me look. We overcast now. It has went from 88 to 87. Feels like 100, but that as soon as this cloud goes over, it's going to pop right back up. But again, I mentioned Georgia, South Carolina border. Look right here. Check that out. And then from the Panhandle down through Florida, same thing's happening. Now, central Mississippi, we had a pretty good storms last night, guys. By night, or by full darkness, they were almost gone, but we had about 3 waves of lightning and heavy rain. I'm talking about gully washers, is what we call them here. A lot of gravel washed down a 400-foot driveway. But again, here, now it looks like they're popping up on us down around the Macomb-Natchez area. So it may be a repeat of last night. But none of this weather is good. Even these tornado watches in Texas are starting to intensify right here. If this intensifies in this area, Oklahoma, you're going to be under the gun in this. You see that? So be aware of this. This is not as strong here, but what it's doing is indicating this rotation. What this heat dome we're under is starting to rotate heat up and over it. But in the moisture that's trapped inside that dome coming out of both the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico, trapped under the dome that we're seeing, is starting these storms. We've seen it before. 2 years ago when we had that really bad heat wave, we saw this dome form, but no moisture here. So in a way, it's a blessing because all the rain was hitting the dome and moving up and over the top. Right now, it's almost the opposite situation. I'm not going to complain because when it was doing that 2 years ago, instead of being 100 or 103, the real feel, I got images taken from 128 to 140 real feel. But again, we're about 5 days out of the official start of the 2025 hurricane season. I think they're calling for about 30 storms, 5 or 6 major. But let's look over into the Atlantic towards the African coast and just see what we're looking at as we speak. Now, looking at the wide Atlantic view, not a lot coming off of Africa. There's some storms here, and here is the Cabo Verde Islands. And all of a lot of times your measurements are that your hurricane coming off of Africa is 100 miles south of Cabo Verde or whatever. But what you got to remember is the beginning of hurricane season usually involves the Caribbean or the Gulf of America, Trump. But what we are seeing along the intercontinental convergence zone right here, storms popping up in this area. The heat is intense over on this side of the planet. Now, that's going to change, but I want you to notice something. El Nino ended last year, and that was the wind that would come out of the Pacific Ocean and strip the top off the hurricanes, you know. And so that was, but it ended. And we're not seeing it now. See that? We're not seeing it anywhere across this area. Everything is moving, as far as the lower levels, to the west. You got some upper levels moving to the east. This really is not part of the El Nino part. So as this goes into early June, this area will heat up some, but what we got to watch, the little storms like we're seeing forming here, and here, and here. This is where the heat is. So that's why you're seeing these storms pop up, and you're seeing the ones from Texas through Tennessee and down through Georgia and Florida and South Carolina pop up. We're getting into, I'm afraid, a very active hurricane season. And again, being in May and we're looking at 103 here as far as real field temperatures, what are we going to see then? We know the Earth is heating up. We've talked about it in several videos lately. And going back for thousands of years, younger dry ice, we talked about in a video just the other day, the solar flare that ended the Ice Age just under 15,000 years ago. Things are picking back up. We're getting into those days, whether you want to admit it or not. And so it's time to think about look, let me back up a moment. We think about the daily events of our life constantly. Work, paying bills, taking care of business, right? But sometimes you kind of got to focus on the physical life and try to put a balance in it. And I mean the spiritual life, excuse me. But to where you're taking time for our Father. You're taking time for yourself to pray and meditate and try to understand the pressures that are coming upon you and your family. And try to find a way to let that vent out and escape. In other words, if certain things happen that creates tension, and whether it's hot weather, your air conditioner goes out, whatever it is, you might want to kind of prepare for those things. In spiritually, in the sense that things are going to get tough. How you handle it is going to make the difference on whether or not you and your family make it. If that makes any sense at all. In other words, be prepared. And I've got a video coming up, and it's about power. And the power, we'll stick to the U.S. right now. But in Texas especially, you've got ERCOT, and we've seen the grid really get in trouble in Texas over these heat waves. Really in the ice storm, too, a few years ago, didn't we, guys? And but that ice storm that Texas you got, I had 3 inches of ice on my decks and limbs down for almost a week until I took a pitchfork and started chipping the ice off the deck so you could walk on it. But it spread from there, but ERCOT was a total disaster. And right now there's something happening. I think I'm going to try to do another video in a few moments, or start on it. There's starting something to happen between the power needs of the world and the ability of the world to produce it. And so there's panic moving in to rush into nuclear power, go back into coal and things like that. It has to be done safely, but there's side effects of massive energy in any country, in any city that those big plants are, whether it's AI data or Bitcoin mining. They not only use a tremendous amount of energy, the same amount as some cities in just these plants. In Texas is a big place. It's got a combination of both types. Bitcoin mining, AI, all of the above, because it's tax friendly. But what is happening, there's a town in Texas called Granbury. You may want to look it up. Granbury, Texas. They put a big, I think it was a Bitcoin mining center there, but they're building tremendous factories. And they consume so much energy, ERCOT is not going to be able to handle it, guys. So what are they thinking? Well, we're going to make some Bitcoin money. Not the young guy, or not the smaller economic group, The poor people, middle class, we're not. We're going to pay more for electric bills because what's going to happen is ERCOT is going to increase your energy bill to subsidize these plants. Why? Because the New World Order is pushing for AI plants and they want Bitcoin mining plants. But in Granbury, Texas, they've got a huge Bitcoin mining plant that I'm sure no one in that town profits from. But it's become a disaster zone, guys. The noise is so loud from these giant fans that it takes to cool it that there's no quietness now, even out of town in some of the farms. And it's causing sickness and dizziness and all kind of things. And so we're seeing the rush to drill, baby, drill. We're seeing we got to have more AI. We got to have more Bitcoin mining, when actually that's going to be the thing destroying the country. Now, also in Texas, guys, going back to drill, baby, drill, it hasn't been that much drill, baby, drilling in Texas for quite a while. It's been more frack, baby, fracking in the Permian Basin. Now, 12 years ago when I started this channel, there was a few of us that talked about fracking. And you can tell the earthquakes in Texas that are fracked because they're all 5 kilometers deep. But anyway, what was happening, let me go back. They were tearing us up. I mean, did not want us talking about that fracking. Because what they're doing, they're injecting salt water into the rocks because they've already got the easy oil. They're injecting water into the rocks, very hot water, to force the remnants of the oil through the cracks and get that out. But guys, it takes, for every 1 barrel, I looked at the stats, for every 1 barrel of oil that they get from fracking, it takes 3 barrels of salt water. What do they do with that salt water? They re-inject it back into the wellheads and then underground. Now, what's happening in Texas, and I'd love to hear your comments, especially the Permian Basin region. Been through there several times, going to Arizona and California. But what they're talking about now is the ground swelling up because they're pumping so much of this excess wastewater into it. And what we were talking about at the end 12 years ago is that was getting into the your water well systems, the groundwater and all. And again, 3 barrels to 1 barrel of oil, you got a tremendous, and you talk about millions of barrels of oil coming out, then you triple that for the millions of barrels of wastewater that is very deadly, pushed back into the ground. So they're seeing ground swelling. They're actually seeing 100-foot geysers like up in Yellowstone erupt in the middle of a field because of the pressure they're forcing on the Permian Basin from repumping the water in there. But right now, back to the initial point, they're running out of that. So in other words, we are kind of at peak oil. We were at peak oil several years ago, then they started fracking. So now we're at stage 2 of peak oil, and it's going down very quickly. There's charts that are showing, and just since last year, going from, say, 178 rigs or something like that in the Texas Permian Basin down to 100. So not quite 50%, but the rig crews are even, the charts are even stronger than that. So they understand, is that why Trump is pushing? And I'm just going to let this play because I've read a lot today. Trump is pushing for these nuclear reactors, the old ones to crank back up, but some smaller efficient units, like for factories or cities or whatever, which is kind of, if it was properly controlled, and they were saying that a piece of uranium the size of a tennis ball could power a city. So if you could, it's kind of like 0-point energy if you could make sure it was safe. So they're going to be pushing, because they're not talking about the oil running out. They just say we need more power. And that's why they want to drill up further north. But what's going to happen is something happened, and there's a video a couple of days ago about the strongest solar flare or proton event in 15,000 years. eliminated the ice age, and that the temperatures measured in that event were 2,024 degrees, something like that. Incredible. And they were showing these melted melt balls, like melted glass, from that heat. So what will all these mini nuclear reactors, plus all the old ones, we have one in Mississippi called Grand Gulf Nuclear. I used to service machines in that plant down there in just outside, just on the river, down Highway 61 out of Vicksburg. So it's a big plant. But if that plant were to go from anything, it would be a disaster. But guys, have you ever, I had to get a clearance to go in there to work on their machines. First floor, I had one clearance. It was a badge. Second floor, if I went up into that level and took any equipment or myself, it was a different badge. Third floor, where the big pools, you could look down in these big clear green pools and see the nuclear rods, that was a whole different security level. And I have seen that. I've worked on some of the equipment in these places. The power there in these big plants is so immense, they would never handle 2,000 degrees or 1,000 degrees coming from a solar flare or a proton event. So as they build all of these plants around the world, they're not calculating a super heat event. Even when the Bible tells us that fourth angel is going to do that work. Now that will happen. The heat event is not something that's going to happen very quickly, as far as that purging solar flare, but it's going to increase year after year, and so it's a mad world. The world is rushing to need more and more power when it's running out of oil. Solar's not working that good for it. By the way, solar works perfect if you don't put it into big fields. Just solarize your home. If you have a panel go out, you can replace it. I've been on solar for a long time. Don't go into, Texas has made that mistake. They could have put that money into individual, all the money they paid these big companies. Each of you guys could have big solar sections, not on your roof, ruining your roof, but like I have, ground mounts. Panel goes out, the only thing really going to go out is a diode, and they're about 10 cents if you know how to solder. But if in the big panels that get hit by tornadoes and hurricanes and everything else, that's a poor way to do it, because you're tying everybody into one central location. But if you guys, and of course we sell solar products on our page at bpearthwatch.com, but that's not why I'm talking about this. But if you're going to tie into solar, don't tie into the grid, or don't have them running at the same time. Mine is either part of my house is solar, the other part is grid, or the grid's down. I run what I can from it. It takes care of business. But tying into a large grid just does not make sense. We've seen the tornadoes come through and rip out maybe a 50-foot or 100-foot section through a solar farm and wipe out whole neighborhoods. Where if it was, going to catch one house, the house would be hurt, their solar system would be hurt, but it wouldn't be everything. But they're running, it's a mad world. We're running out of power, and they're demanding more and more power for AI, for Bitcoin mining, and it's going to be a collision of destruction. I've got a lot of details on that particular subject. I'll try to get them up either tonight or in the morning. We're watching, and it's been a long video, guys. Thank you for watching. It's a heads up. Be safe.